Hi, everyone. My name is Neil Metzler. I'm a senior cloud business advisor at DoiT, and I have the pleasure to sometimes join you on alphalist events. So I might have seen you in Hamburg or down in Munich, but yeah, it's great to be here, be part of this conversation. I'm excited to invite two experts from our side here to talk specifically about the pitfalls for Gen AI. So we had a lot of fun coming up with this because I'm sure your inboxes and your feeds are already quite full with the opportunity, the irresistible opportunity for each of you and your companies to accelerate and do more with Gen AI. So we thought about it might be interesting to take a step back, look at some of the common pitfalls that our practitioners and practitioner leads are seeing in the field. And we hope that this can be an informative session that maybe confirms or validates some things you already know, and also stretches you in some areas that you might not be quite as familiar with. So this is designed to be CTO facing, not for heads of data or PhD data scientists. And I'm very excited now to introduce our speakers. So first up, shall I go ahead and share my screen then? Yeah, let's do this. Perfect. So as mentioned, the topic is 5 pitfalls for Gen AI. We had some fun coming up with this image here. It's a computer kicking an error code for a pitfall exception detected. And what I got back from this particular model was literally a computer kicking another computer with an error code on the screen. I found that amusing. So let me, without further ado, introduce, first of all, Hannah Schulze, based in Lucerne, Switzerland. She is a cloud architect at DoiT. She is and DoiT is an AWS, Google, and Azure Premier partner. Hannah writes and speaks on sovereign cloud, data residency, and Gen AI implementation hurdles. She is GCP and AWS certified cloud data engineer, and she possesses deep experience building cloud data platforms and efficient data warehouses. She previously studied microelectronics and is an advocate for women in tech with a very cool Polish language podcast, which you can check out if you are interested. So welcome to Hannah. And second, you will hear from Mehdi Nemlaghi in Paris. Mehdi is a staff cloud architect at DoiT, an AWS, Google, and Azure Premier partner. And Mehdi brings 15 plus years of experience in data science, big data topics, and machine learning. He currently leads DoiT's Gen AI Accelerator program, helping teams in diverse industries move from ideation to POC and pre-production in a matter of weeks. His previous work experience and why I was interested to recruit him here today included roles as a head of data science, and a senior data scientist, as well as with the subtitle Chief Algorithms Officer. So you can ask him about that over a glass of wine, hopefully at a future Alphalist event. Mehdi studied financial mathematics and general engineering. So I'm going to now warmly turn over to invite Hannah to speak with you about pitfalls 1 and 2. And this page is here to give you a taste of what's coming, what to expect. And let me just remove my screen. So yes, exactly. So as I mentioned, some of these should be familiar challenges, but we're trying to go a step deeper and provide more rare insights into that here today. That's the challenge that we're taking on together. So with that, Hannah, I would invite you to speak to the pitfalls 1 and 2, and then we'll hear from Mehdi on pitfalls 3, 4, 5, with all of your questions moderated at the end. So welcome, Hannah.
Thank you very much, Neil. So as Neil mentioned, I am actively working and huge fan and passionate about topics like digital sovereignty and also a sovereign cloud. So when I saw the topic of this presentation, I was really tempted to look at this topic through the lenses of sovereignty. And very quickly, what is digital sovereignty? It's basically owning your data and owning the underlying infrastructure of your product. And you are trying to prevent or want to prevent the external influence on it, right? Therefore, when I look at the Gen AI and when I look at the managed services in the cloud provider world, I see that the big pitfall is that the data residency and privacy gets complicated, right? And let's start with data residency. And there is a key word here, and I think people are gonna, like people from Germany and the European Union are gonna know it. It's GDPR. And let me start with PII data, right? So personal identifiable data, where the data residency is very, very complicated. And with the GenAI applications is exactly the same case, which is we have a personal identifiable data and we wanna, I don't know, fine tune our model with it. But we have model only available in US, let's say. That means that we would need to transfer our data outside of the EU in order to actually fine-tune our model, and that's absolutely a no-go. So that's the first issue that we are facing. Secondly, if we are using PII data, and a lot of companies are very, very concerned about the customer data, but it's also a data of your employees, right? It's IP addresses, email addresses, names, surnames. It can be a lot. Yeah, so what happens with GenAI? GenAI is absolutely built upon the data, and especially with like fine tuning and so on. The more data, the more good quality data we have, the better results at the end we are achieving. And with this need of separating the data for EU and US, let's say, or Asia, whatever other regions of the world, we are basically decreasing the size of our data set, and therefore the results can be not so accurate, right? So that's another issue. And I am aware that not everyone is even considering doing anything with PII and GenAI since the technology is so young. So let's talk a bit about the privacy, because the privacy is not only in regards to PII data, but any intellectual property of our companies, right? So we really want to protect what we created, and we just don't want to open and share our data with the entire world, right? So here, the things also can get tricky, but the cloud vendors are really, really stepping up the game in order to ensure that we have a security features in those managed services, right? So let's say we have encryption, right? There are a lot of new features built in to make sure that you are basically securing your data. Sorry, but what I really want to emphasize is for you as a CTO, when you look at the statements from a big cloud providers, right? They are saying things like customers can use service X, whatever it is, Bedrock, Vertex AI, in compliance with GDPR. So the word "can" is very, very important here, because this is this shared responsibility model, right? So whatever inputs you are providing your model with, whatever outputs are generated by this model, you are responsible for it. And it's with every aspect of it, right? It's about sharing a fake information. It's about sharing a personal information. You are the responsible party here, right? And so you need to be aware that the responsibility for the data lays with you. And I'm aware that you are in this very, very difficult spot, because from one point of view, you really want to leverage the big cloud providers, right? Because things like AWS Bedrock or Vertex AI, they are really speeding up the development process. So suddenly you can just send an API request to the model that is pre-trained and you're getting an output, right? That's speeding up the delivery of GenAI features dramatically in comparison to like hosting the model yourself. And it's also probably cheaper than hosting and training the model yourself, right? So this is a huge opportunity, but you still want to stay sovereign, and you want to stay secure, right? So even though we see those obstacles, you can actually make it work compliant and secure. So this is something that I really want to emphasize, that doesn't matter the size of your company, managed services, especially in the context of GenAI, they are a good thing, but you need to put your own effort, your team needs to put an effort to actually make it secure and sovereign. So there are certain recommendations that are prepared for you. I think the impacts of not having it right are actually quite sure with PII data. So in case of data leakage of like of personal information. Obviously, it's a huge issue. You can be banned from data processing. You can be fined. You can have a reputation loss. Like there's a lot of things that can happen to you. But even with data privacy, what I see companies to really look at the data privacy when they have features in their products that require gathering the data, and the potential customers, they are starting to ask questions. Hey, how are you storing the data? How are we sure that it's actually secure? What is going to happen with our data, and so on? And this potential issue with customer acquisition is forcing companies to actually look into data privacy, right? So yeah, let's look at the recommendations. So how to actually minimize the impact of this pitfall. And I am aware that this is very like difficult topic, and it's very complex, and it requires a lot of skills and expertise to actually navigate it. But I think there are some certain basic things that you can ensure that your workload, that you can benefit from those Gen AI technologies and still stay secure. So we have a first recommendation. I think it's pretty obvious, but I needed to put it here because I saw a huge data sets being shared with pre-trained models. And it's, first of all, it's not cost effective, but second of all, like you want to really minimize the amount of data that you are sharing the model with the model, and you only want to share the things that are getting the job done, right? Secondly, you want to invest in observability and monitoring, and I think it will be something that we will recommend multiple times here. But somehow with Gen AI applications, there's this different approach in which we are okay with monitoring and observe our applications on Kubernetes cluster. But I don't know, somehow with Gen AI, we just put a bunch of data into this black box. There is some output, and we are just fine with it. So monitoring your applications is actually very important, and we see a rise of even open source products that are allowing you to monitor this. But there is also a human oversight important in this. Like you want to see what my application is actually producing, right? And with that, there is recommendation 3, which can actually help you. So there are this box, like out-of-the-box ready security features. So I'm referring a lot to AWS Bedrock. So let's say Bedrock has this Bedrock guardrails, which you can make sure that you are anonymizing any PII data. You can make sure that that your model is not spreading misinformation. Someone is asking, hey, is the earth flat? And your model is like, yeah, sure. Absolutely, you know. So if like you can actually put some guardrails onto your model, right? And then when we look at the recommendation 4th, this is something that often is not considered when we talk about data privacy. And since I'm really into this like sovereignty world, I need to talk about actually privacy in regards to your cloud vendor. So if you are in the cloud and you are obviously using all the security features like encryption and service managed keys and so on, it's amazing. But there is additional option like and it's customer managed keys, and it's not often used because it's very it's additional overhead, it's additional complexity, and you need to store it with a third party partner. In Germany, it's, for example, T-Systems, Telecom. But this is a thing that really, especially in our market, like a German, European market, it's something that is more and more important. So the people, your customers, your potential customers have this feeling, hey, the data is actually secured from each and every side. So the keys are not anymore with a cloud provider. The keys are with external provider. There is a trail that is actually showing you who has access and so on and so forth, right? So that is actually something that I see people are considering more and more. And the good thing, the managed Gen AI services, for example, in AWS, also with GCP, you have a possibility to encrypt your data with externally managed keys. So let's go to the pitfall 2. I mentioned that the digital sovereignty is focusing on data and is focusing also on the infrastructure. So we want to own our infrastructure. And pitfall for me, a big pitfall with GenAI managed services, but actually if you look at it, any managed services, is the fact that it increases vendor lock-in. So with a GenAI managed services, it's really this unique situation in which you are just sending a REST API request with your data, and you are getting an output back from the provider, right? And that means that all the infrastructure, everything, it's just a service that is enabled for you. So what happens if one day provider is saying, hey, you know what? We actually are not interested in you accessing this service anymore. Sorry, whatever. You are not allowed to use it anymore. Like what happens? And usually I want people to actually ask themselves the question, is this GenAI feature that I'm using and building upon this model or this service, is it something that, like, what's the consequence of losing it? Is it, are we gonna lose some money and we are gonna lose our chatbot in our product, but whatever, it's fine, it's just a chatbot? Or is it going to be, we basically are losing the whole source of our revenue because it was a core of our product, right? So the problem with those managed services is basically we are putting our eggs in one basket. We are having not only reduced flexibility and agility, but we are also completely dependent on one vendor, right? So it's very difficult to build a cloud agnostic architecture with those services. And what would need to do, the option A would be to basically have two providers with the same model, and if something happens, you can switch to the other provider. But it's very, very difficult and almost not possible with a current situation among the 2-3 biggest cloud vendors, right? So my recommendation would be to just think about it. So to just think about it, how much my revenue is dependent on this feature. And if your revenue is completely dependent on this feature, or if your product is based on this, then you should have a plan B. You should have a plan. If you're a startup and you are just building POC, that's one thing. You can deliver it, but then you should have a plan B in your head, how to actually move to your own infrastructure that you are owning, and you are hosting your model. And if something happens with a provider A, obviously it's not perfect. Like you have your Kubernetes cluster model or whatever, it's not perfect if you're losing it, but there is an option to switch to other providers. So you don't need to completely reinvent the wheel. You know what I mean? So that's that is something very, very much important if you wanna use GenAI services and you still wanna maintain a digital sovereignty. And I will now pass to Mehdi with his third pitfall.
Brilliant, Anna. Thanks a lot. So I'm going to pursue with the pitfall number 3, which is quite proverbial now and kind of self-explained. So I'm going to go on and share my screen. Perfect. So pressure from VCs and board to do GenAI. See, one of the advantage of having an increasing number of gray hair is that I have seen multiple hype cycles, especially when we operate in the analytics space in this last 15 years. Of course, this is not, this is the current Gen AI momentum that we are living since 22 is, if we look at the actual progress that were made back then, it's more of offering a playground to everybody rather than an actual breakthrough in research. It's funny because the research breakthrough happened after this UX revolution. Anyway, there is increasing pressure for multiple organizations to implement a GenAI project, whatever that can mean. And actually, when preparing this talk, I had this souvenir from a decade ago, where VC and boards just pressed organizations to do Hadoop/big data, whatever the cost it was. So it's a trade-off to achieve here, because on one hand you want to explore the possibilities and the things that you can achieve with these new technologies, but on the other hand you want to move away as fast as possible from the POC stage, the never-ending POC stage that can lead to multiple data teams offering models that are not used. So this is a very common pitfall. If you can see actually all the surveys about, I'm including the traditional AI models, even now with the maturity that we have in the AI/ML space, there's approximately 60% to 80%, depending on the survey, of the AI projects that don't move away from the POC stage. So we are going to see a couple of recommendations that that will hopefully apply in order to get out of this POC stage. Okay. Of course, the first one, it's a pretty self-explained. Quantify your business outcome. What are you going to what do you want to achieve with a generative AI project? Do you want to save time for your employees? Do you want them to be more productive? Do you want to save costs? Try to find an estimate of what you want to do. Try to quantify. This is how we operate actually at DoiT. We define a six-stage project from ideation to production. We first start with ideation, and the ideation we don't get out of the room if we don't have any business KPI to achieve. This is paramount actually, because if you provide any estimate, you'll have the buy-in from the whole organization. The second recommendation would be about a tricky subject, evaluating LLMs. There are tons of media attention if you read in the subject, with this brand new model achieved, let's say, 72% on the MMLU benchmark, or this brand new off-the-shelf model achieved 87% on this coding data set benchmark. I'm going to tell it straight ahead. These numbers are not reproducible. Therefore, if I cannot reproduce them in my laptop, I'm not going to trust them. Well, this was the promise of the open source community, especially in AI/ML, to reproduce every result. See, a couple of years ago, when we had, I would say, the prequel of the GenAI hype with BERT and the attention models, organizations could still reproduce some pretty gold standard metrics in order to evaluate the quality of a given LLM. So here, LLM, large language model, or even language model to be simpler. Now, it's impossible. Well, because it requires lots of computing power. So the second recommendation would be about evaluation in the in your scoping. When you scope your use case, you evaluate with the gold standard dataset that your organization owns, not a very abstract one that doesn't necessarily apply to your use case, unless you are a foundation model provider, which operates in a completely different space in the value chain. The third recommendation, in order to avoid this pitfall of trying to do Gen AI just for the sake of doing it, is recognizing that the use cases from a consumer perspective are different from an organization perspective. So here it's summarized as recognize B2C is different than B2B. Let me give you an example here. When I try to rephrase an email to impress my boss, I do it with the help of Gen AI, but it is considered as a B2C use case. For it doesn't, it improves at personal level my impact, but it doesn't improve the organization as a whole. And this relates to the recommendation one. There are tons of studies available. The one that is now de facto standard from a strategic perspective is a McKinsey study on impacts by verticals with several use cases with generative AI. That's back to September 23. So I think it will be updated soon. But you can see, depending on your vertical and on your organization size, you'll likely find a use case that will help your organization. And of course, it also relates to the recommendation one: scope your use case and the capabilities that will be achieved by your Gen AI project. But I'll get to that later with a further recommendation. And of course, here recommendation 4, pretty obvious. Emphasize data preparation at every stage. So here it doesn't change from the good old-fashioned AI/ML projects. I think that we all know the adage that say garbage in, garbage out. Therefore, we need to have a more thorough data preparation than before. And this applies also to the non-generative AI tasks. For instance, having your data team operating the data on a lost single Jupyter notebook lost somewhere in the organization is not the path to success. Pitfall number 4, underinvestment in observability. It relates to pitfall 3, actually. So generally, we saw that if we could quantify the business outcome, therefore, the second stage would happen, which scoping your Gen AI project in order to get the right SLA for your system. What do you want to achieve precisely, thoroughly? And this is when your overhyped Gen AI project becomes yet another software project with its own metrics to follow, with its own observability tools, with its own costs, with its own intricacies to solve. And These aspects are most of the time overlooked right now on path to production. It's and or the customers that I've seen doing that, so implementing successfully a GenAI project into production stage. Actually, some of them rolled back because of lack of observability. I had a customer who rolled back. It was a chatbot, an external-facing chatbot. The customer rolled back the feature. Why? Not because of wrong answers that were provided by the chatbot, not because of the latency. No, it was because it wasn't designed to monitor the costs associated to it. As simple as that. So here we are going to see, and of course there is another caveat when we underinvest in observability. It's for compliance reasons. We need to know where the data flows in and where the data flows out. So from a recommendations perspective, the first one is choose the right SLA metrics. So we have your typical cost, delay, cost, latency, quality metrics to observe, to monitor from an observability perspective. For instance, if you want to add an interaction level between your external facing data and the customer, you don't want the customer to be impatient or to lose patience while waiting for their answer. Therefore, there is a pretty proverbial metric which we call token per second. Okay, so a token, let's say it's a word or a slice of a word. So basically, it's a number of words that are outputted by an LLM per a given second, and this relates to the latency. There was an attention, for instance, with another metric, which was time to first token. So when would the first word would appear to the customer? So because we don't want the customer to lose patience. So some systems were heavily optimized to quickly output one word. But what would happen if there is one word outputted and the customer would wait for ages before having a full answer? Not to mention the accuracy of the answer. It's extremely frustrating. So here, think of these real latency metrics. Of course, there are other metrics such as average time between two tokens, etc., etc. I'd be happy to discuss that later. The second one, the cost tracking. Cloud vendors offer pretty decent and advanced tagging system, allowing you to track down your usage. If you are not managing your LLM yourself, I would strongly suggest to use them, because the pricing model won't differ from one cloud vendor to another, right? You will get the same. You are outputted for the data you are feeding in the model and the data that is outputted, and it's the sum of the two basically that you are paying. So in such a case, I would suggest you to use these tagging systems effectively. In the case that you are hosting your own model, therefore it becomes your classical infrastructure to follow along with the classical infrastructure tagging as well. The second observability tool, and it's according to me, one of the most important aspects that distinguish what we can call MLOps from the LLMOps space, is to track the quality of your model. So if you are grounding your GenAI project with data, first there is accuracy. Of course, we all know the concept of hallucination. So the fact that an LLM is not able to say 100% of the time the truth, and it needs to be the accuracy of an answer needs to be tracked. I would recommend here to use your own dataset from your own use case. Robustness. What is robustness? So we know that LLMs have non-deterministic output. So basically, you can provide the same input to an LLM. The answer might differ. Whatever, especially if you are not hosting the model yourself, especially if you are using a third-party API, even if you are lowering the temperature. Yes, please, Neil.
Hey, Mehdi. Yeah, I just wanted to suggest that let's assume that folks have the terms definition already, and let's move more quickly through the recommendations, because this could be like a whole 4-hour masterclass, but I know that we just have about 20 minutes left.
Thanks. Yeah, I lost track of time. Thanks a lot. So yes, so robustness. So basically, the ability of your model to be robust and not to change drastically. Safety filters. It relates to Hannah's recommendations. Use safety filters and guardrails in order to reduce to reduce uncertainty related to that. There are pretty decent managed tools that do that. If you want to change your foundation model or LLM, just use orchestrator that will allow you to switch effectively. This is a promise made by open source technologies such as LangChain, actually, that you can really switch effectively and simply. And finally, there are some MLOps solutions that are commoditized for evaluating and tracking experiments, such as MLflow. Now there's Giscar coming as in the ecosystem. Use them. This is heavily recommended. Okay, the last pitfall is relates to the third one. It's basically AGI or organizations amazed by new AGI advances versus what runs best for me in production. So basically, it's from what I've seen with previous interactions with customers, like there are breakthroughs every day. Every single day, there's a brand new model in town that will be able to understand, images, videos, text, now audio also, and that will achieve having the highest exam scores, in quantum physics, or whatever new breakthrough that we can imagine. This is great. Don't get me wrong. This is great, and the pace of the research is unprecedented. But on the other hand, actually, there's a growth of multiple models that are way smaller and that might totally be a fit for your use case. And there's so this double-legged growth actually is not mutually exclusive. On one hand, you have a few model providers that do really big advances with bigger model, and on the other hand, some other providers that are either open source or private model providers that will provide with more specialized to a certain vertical, slightly or heavily smaller models that would be really, really helpful for you. And the former often hides or obfuscates the achievements and breakthroughs of the latter. So recommendation one, pretty straightforward. Use the full spectrum of available language models. There's a whole model. I call that a model zoo. The small language models and larger language models are both growing and nurturing each other from multiple perspectives. So I will give you a straightforward example. If you want to have sentiment classification, you can achieve that by using a brand new LLM, but you can also achieve that by using a small model. And by small here, I mean several orders of magnitude smaller model that you can heavily commoditize, that you can even host in your own laptop, and that achieves the same accuracy. If you want very simple sentiment classification. Recommendation 2, get the most out of your LLM before fine-tuning. Fine-tuning is a last resort option. Okay, there are numerous options that you can do before trying to fine-tune a big model. Fine-tuning is a hard problem because it can lead to some phenomena called catastrophic forgetting. So proper prompt design, give examples with few shots, try to make the LLM reason with chain of thought. Use retrieval augmented generation if you want to ground your LLM with actual data. Use agents to make the LLM make the LLM act as orchestrators rather than executors. So there are numerous options before fine-tuning. Fine-tuning is a tricky issue. It can be really risky in terms of operational efficiency. And the other recommendation is the fact that LLMs are nothing but stochastic parrots. They do excel when we don't tell them to do anything. We just try to shape them in a way to execute a single task. And it relates to the recommendation number 1 here. You can use different LLMs for different use cases, and depending on the quality of your evaluations, the SLA, and of course, your ROI perspective. And that's it on my end. Thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you so much, Mehdi. As we get ready to go into the Q&A here, if you could just move to the next slide. I've put a, yes, perfect. And just to recap on that, perhaps if I can share my screen here, I wanted to put the, let me see this. just the 5 kind of observations up on the screen to stimulate discussion and remind folks where we've been. So we had these 5 pitfalls we organized around. Thank you for your attention. We have 2 questions that came in already, and I think the first one is for Hannah here. And please use the Q&A function if you'd like to ask a question on any of these 5 pitfalls. So let's go to the first question here, and I'll exclude names for the sake of the recording. So Hannah, the question here, and I'll paste it in the chat. I think it refers to one of the first pitfalls you described. It's talking about excluding inputs and sharing IP-sensitive information, and where that risk is most is most concentrated. So, taking a look at this question, have you seen the question here, Hannah?
Yes. Yeah. So the question is it primarily with pre-training where the data by definition would be used? Yeah, I think so. But the other risk that I see, and it's not often, like companies are not often giving much thought to that, is like with GDPR, you have actually right to request your data to be forgotten, right? So you need to have some auditing in place to actually ensure that if someone will fail this kind of request with your company, that you can actually audit and make sure that this data is actually deleted. And then you have also processes in place that are tracking that this kind of data was deleted, right? So this is another thing that can be tricky, because how do you handle that with models and models like that? And there is an obvious one, which is you have models that are accessible in a certain regions of the world, and you need to actually transfer the data in order to use them. That was something that I mentioned about the huge cloud vendors that are referring to those services. They can be used with a compliance with all of those regional data regulations, but you actually need to ensure that you're using the service in a good way. So those are those 2 that I can think about. I don't know, Mehdi, do you have any other field experience that you can?
So just to relating on that, I think that the question is really well structured, because there are multiple risks when sharing this sensitive information, and it's pre-training, fine-tuning, and inference time. Actually, when you are at inference time, so when we are using the model at given that it's available on a given region, which is a prerequisite for GDPR, as Hannah mentioned, cloud vendors have put in place mechanisms actually to make the data transient between you as a user of the model and the foundation model provider. So it works both ways. You cannot reverse engineer the model parameters or the prompt from the system prompt from the API. And on the other hand, the model provider is by design not able to use the data that you're feeding during a service, so your customers' data, to fine-tune or to use their services. It's similar to insurance, actually. They build their systems as third-party hubs, actually, trusted hubs.
Super. Thank you both. So I'll just take the slides down now to make it a bit more roundtable here. And I've pasted the kind of 5 pitfalls in case they spark additional questions. Want to recognize we did receive a really nice, very specific question from one of the attendees. And we are not going to tackle that one in the large round here. But because it is very, very specific and nuanced, I would suggest perhaps getting in touch and sitting down one-on-one to kind of unpack a bit more what's behind that question, what the particular requirements are. So thank you very much for that question. We would like to speak more about it in a different setting. Yeah. So opening the floor for other questions via Q&A or spontaneously.
Maybe this is Jan, spontaneously. I mean, what was the pitfall in and around vendor lock-in? Maybe it's just me, but I don't see a big risk of vendor lock-ins right now because, well, given the early state of the different LLMs, the OpenAI API seems to have been copied by most vendors. So right now, I wouldn't have a sleepless night over switching the model provider or even the service provider behind it. But maybe that's just me. So would be happy to also hear from the audience what they think about it.
I can take it. Try to have an answer. So it's not about the business model. Indeed, the business model that is input token plus output token with these the parameters is now pretty common, and indeed from the coming from the OpenAI APIs. What can increase the vendor lock-in is the goodies around them. Actually, all the goodies of encryption, of having a proper model versioning. Actually, that is at the very least fuzzy in the OpenAI with the OpenAI APIs. You need to be very very consistent about it. If you are using any database, vector database, let's say for a RAG system, here you would also need to consider it from the cloud or on-prem perspective. So it's not only about in my opinion here, it's not only about the model itself. It's all the aspects surrounding that can increase vendor lock-in. It's as far as I can comprehend this.
Yes, especially that in case of let's take AWS Bedrock as an example. They are explicitly stating that they are not using your data to actually enrich the model. So you have your personal private copy of the model. You can fine tune it and so on. So even in the context of this like data privacy and so on, what are you willing to trade off to use this model, right? So if you are fine with just going with OpenAI API, it's okay, right? But exactly the offering that, for example, a cloud vendor like AWS is giving you, you have all of those goodies. And if you are a bit more concerned about exactly privacy, or if you're catering to regulated industry, they will never agree to use an OpenAI API because you are not able to basically prove that the data encryption is on the level that it should be, that the data can be used to train the model, like foundation model itself, right? So I see it here. Right, but I, as I said, as long as it's not the complete core of your business, I think I'm fine if that's core of your business and you think there are no risks there. I also don't want to be paranoid or like that. I don't want to cause a paranoia in your life, right? But I think that's something to just consider, right?
Yeah. And it's great to emphasize, we obviously build a lot of projects on some of the services that were mentioned. So the framing today is certainly around pitfalls, but we want to make sure we strike a balanced note about that because there is so much opportunity. So we have one follow-up question here, but I wanted to, on a similar topic, but I wanted to expand this a bit. Is there anyone who has a different topic that they'd like to raise just for the last 3 minutes while we're here together? Okay. last call, last chance. Otherwise, I will go to this follow-up question. So the follow-up question is, have you established criteria that guide your decision when to move from an LLM by API mode to a more self-hosted LLM setup? Mehdi, what do you think about that?
So short answer, yes, we do have a set of established criteria. It's actually we try to tackle from a slightly different angle here, because LLM by API, you can say which LLM. So which LLM by API, and this gives a whole perspective on the foundation model selection and evaluation strategies. So the criteria mainly for choosing LLM with an API to a self-hosted LLM doesn't differ that much in terms of choosing between multiple foundation models. Of course, the skill set that you have to maintain such a model service, whereas it's more and more commoditized. You have the modality, the type of output that is generated by your text. Some, let's say, models that generate audio are quite rare right now, so you might need to self-host them. The cost, the latency that you want to achieve, the inference options, the language support, actually very important criteria. I have French customers who work with French data that would be eager to have better French output in the most common models that we have, and had to go on self-hosted LLM. And of course, as Hannah mentioned, geographical location for regulation, compliance, etc. So yeah, it depends on multiple factors, but I would plunge this decision on choosing and evaluating an LLM as a whole. I hope that the answer was clear.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mehdi. Thank you, Hannah, Chaya, and alphalist members for having us. I know we've reached time here for today. If you have further questions, please let Chaya and the team know. They will land them with us, and we're happy to follow up. We'll also be sharing the slides and recording key materials and kind of a one-pager takeaway for you as a recap.